I used to compare myself to other successful coaches and think, oh yeah, I can totally do that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get their results and replicate their results that they're getting without understanding, like, I'm not in the same place.
Here comes the monkey in your head, and the monkey starts to judge the clients. Your thoughts will start to, or you will feel that it's about to go in that area. If you can catch the thought, you can put a pause on it. If you cannot catch the thought, then you become the thought.
Comparison is the thief of joy. There could be another side of that, which is comparison is a seed of hope if you do it in a certain way. You cannot succeed without failure. You have to fail. It's part of the part of the recipe. We're having some serious connection and tech difficulties today. And if you didn't know, it's Faisal's in black and white today. If you're watching this in our community on our live broadcast, for some reason, his video is black and white, and we don't know why. Coaches Nation, welcome. Welcome to the Coaches Journey podcast. We are broadcasting live to our community, raw, unedited, unfiltered, as you can see. Like, we just had some major problems. But our topic today is comparison to other coaches, other successful coaches. We always tend to compare ourselves as humans to other people. And a lot of time that can be beneficial and not beneficial. So we want to talk about some of those traps and some of those benefits today in our conversation. I'm here today with our co-host. We're co-hosts. I'm Daniel Fernandez, and this is Faisal and San. We're both co-hosts of the Coaches Journey podcast, and we're glad you're with us as coaches. So Faisal, are you with us, or do we have more technical difficulties?
I think we are. I'm back, I think. Go for it.
You're back? All right. Let's talk about comparison to other successful coaches. We all do it. I do it. I'm sure you do it, Faisal. Let's talk about like some of the experiences you've had. Let's start with you, Faisal, and some of the experiences you've had in comparison across the years.
This is a huge problem. I would say I am less prone to this at this stage in my business than I was when I was starting out. When I was starting out, this was a huge issue for me. And I can remember I used to go to go to the community groups where other coaches hung out, or they were part of my certification. And I would see all these wins. And yes, of course, I'd be inspired by them, but there's a part of my mind that would be pulled towards comparisons, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting those results? And what's happening? And again, there's a lot to unpack there, but I had those thoughts, one, of course, didn't serve me, but they went much deeper. They were much deeper rooted than I originally thought. And so the reason why we're doing this podcast to help you understand that, like, don't ignore those thoughts. Let's deal with those thoughts. Let's deal with those emotions as they come up, because comparison is a natural human thing. I don't think it's a coach's thing. I think our minds are wired to compare us to other people around us. We're a social species. Now, as we become aware of it, we can leverage that a little bit better. We can direct our mind in a different way. And that's what we want to go into today. But really, I remember every time I would watch coach, and this would be so odd because we just go through a certification. All of a sudden, a coach would post, within the certification, it's like the second day or the third day, it's like, I just got 5 clients. I'm like, what? I can barely process what just happened here. How did this person go and get? But what I didn't know, that person probably had a successful coaching business, or they had a marketing agency, or they had a business background, or they had a list or something. Most people don't share context when they share things. That's probably one of the reasons, because I had so much pain. Whenever I share something in any group, I put context in there. Just to be like, just so you know, it took me 7-8+ years to get here. Just in case your mind is going there.
Totally.
So, but it never connected in my head.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I have like there's another version of that I have had most of my career, and it's not, coaching is not the only industry that suffers from comparison, but I think it's worse personally to feel in the coaching industry because it feels so personal, right? Like, you're coaching, it's about you, and you're coaching when it's actually about the clients. We'll talk about that in another podcast. But the one thing that I did is, like, I falsely thought, like, the comparison. Like, I used to compare myself to other successful coaches and think, oh yeah, I can totally do that. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get their results and replicate their results that they're getting without understanding, like, I'm not in the same place. It wasn't as much the frustration of seeing other coaches get successes. It was more like the frustrating belief that, of course, I could do that, and then not being able to do it. Right. So it's like there's like a version of comparisons. Like I compare myself unduly. Like I shouldn't have been comparing myself with their level of success and their business background and their knowledge and all the things that they're doing for the same reasons that $5 stock. Maybe they have a list. Maybe they have a marketing, background. Maybe they have a coaching background. Maybe they have a business background. I didn't know anything about that. So I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know that I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was the easy way to compare. It's easy to compare myself to the world's best when I don't know what they know. And I don't know that I don't know as much. Right.
Yeah.
And so like there's lots of versions of this. But there's a version of it that can be really powerfully beneficial too, which is the version of like, wow, that's cool. I like that as part of my vision. I'm going to go about figuring out what version of that I want to create for myself, and then go about figuring out what skills I need and be more intentional with planning and figuring out what are the pieces of the puzzle that I need to learn, and like going with that humility that I need to learn and I need to grow. And there's a journey here, and especially in coaching with like every skill set is a journey. It's not like there's one skill set you just like learn in 5 minutes. It's like all of it is a journey. And so going with that humble, everything's a journey. And at every level, like even today, after 10 years in the industry, I still feel like I'm learning every day. And there's still like a lot of times where I feel like there's a comparison happening in the back of my head. And I've recognized those thoughts now way more than I used to. And it still happens for sure. But part of it is like noticing that and being like, okay, what's the part of that comparison that's beneficial to me as a coach? And what's the part of it that's not beneficial? Because as long as I'm beating myself up for not having something or for not being able to do it or replicate or do whatever, if I'm beating myself up, I'm creating, headwinds against my progress. Instead, I can use it as inspiration or as, curiosity to find out more about how I could do that or how that does or doesn't apply to me. And that's a much better frame for a coach than to just get stuck in that comparison trap.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned something that's really powerful in there is that now you recognize those thoughts a lot more. And
Yeah.
that's the problem, that when you're new in an industry or in an environment, it's very easy for your thoughts to take over. And I think this is where coaches might have skill sets that will help you. So if you have done coaching to a certain degree, and something similar to this happens in our coaching session. So for example, you're listening to a client, here comes the monkey in your head, and the monkey starts to judge the clients. Your thoughts will start to, or you will feel that it's about to go in that area. If you can catch the thought, if you can catch the thought, you can put a pause on it. If you cannot catch the thought, then you become the thought in that moment. It's such a subtle thing to go from that. And here's what happens, and I've seen this so many times. I've seen this in my own calls. I've seen this observing other coaches' calls. As soon as they're taken over by that judgment thought, it's so obvious to everybody, but except to themselves. It's obvious to the client, it's obvious to anybody observing, but it's not obvious to them. And the same thing happens in the comparison world, is that if you can catch the thought, because all it is a thought, is that you watch that and you translate and you add a meaning to it, and then you say, you know what, I'm comparing myself. You're not. Your mind is comparing, and a lot of people look at that as a negative thing. I think that's a normal function of the human mind. There's nothing wrong with you. If your mind didn't compare you to other people, you would never get context, never understand frame of reference. Of course, you're going to compare yourself to somebody ahead, or your mind, well, more accurately. So just as a starting point, I think coaches have the skill set to catch that, or you can actually, and that will make you a better coach, because, okay, so my mind is starting to compare me to this person. In what way am I inspired? Am I comparing? I should be there, or maybe I should have all the skill sets that this experienced coach has developed to get to where he or she is. It's unreasonable when you start to question it. You're like, that none of that makes any sense. But then if you're taken over by that thought, then your emotions join with it, and all of a sudden you go into this rut. And then what happens? You get in your head, and then you forget, or you get burnt out, or you start to be like, well, I should have all that. Let me go market myself in that way, or let me go do the thing that coach is doing, which will not work for you, because that coach has a completely different system. They have experience and skill sets, things that you haven't worked on. So just as a starting point, paying attention to that thought, and also understanding what we said, that always remember context. Everybody's life is so different. And I actually learned this not from the coaching world. I learned it from investors. when I started working with investors, a lot of these guys are capital raisers. So I saw their social media posting, I saw them in different groups, and then they would come to the coaching call with me. And then we would go deeper into their life. And when I would go deeper, I'd be like, if all those people who saw those posts knew all the things that were happening in their life, they would never say, I wish I had this person's life. They'd be like, you keep your problem, I'll keep mine.
I love that. And that reminds me of a couple things. And there's a saying, comparison is the thief of joy. There could be another side of that, which is comparison is a seed of hope if you do it in a certain way, right? But the point you're making about how it steals our joy to compare ourselves to other people, those people who are farther along in, let's say, business or coaching, or even like, let's say you're a first year student in your medical residency versus somebody who's had 30 years of experience, you're not going to fall into the same trap because you're on a stage development. Like, you get that automatically. For some reason in coaching, it doesn't feel the same way often. And when you look at that person who has so much more experience, they have a bigger business, which means they have bigger problems. The problems they're struggling with now are problems that we probably don't even have the capability to even understand, because the things you're struggling with today are problems that they've gone through already, most likely. And they've come on the other side and they continue to grow. And every time you grow through these problems, because you're facing those problems and staying with perseverance through them, like, you become a little bit more expanded and you can solve bigger problems. And oftentimes, if a problem is too big for us to solve, then it's probably not a problem. Like, if it's a problem is too big for us to even have in our life today, we're probably not ready for that level of problem, right? Like, so like, you're not, like, for example, if I'm trying to think of how to formulate what I'm trying to say, which is, if somebody has $1 million business, they have $1 million level problems. They might have $100,000 or $200,000 problem to solve. If you have a $1,000 business, you probably don't have $1 million problem to solve. You probably have a $1,000 level problem to solve. You're thinking in terms of hundreds of dollars. But if you have a $100,000 business, you're thinking in terms of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, maybe. But most likely you're thinking in tens of thousands of dollars. Just from a financial perspective, you probably don't understand how to manage a business with $10 million of revenue, which is different than managing a business with $1 million of revenue. And this is just on the financial side. There's also things on the client side, things on the sales side. There's so many different skill sets and pieces of the puzzle.
Daniel,
and I know,
are you moving your mic around? Are you
no.
moving your mic around? Because your voice sometimes goes in and out.
Okay, maybe it's because I'm looking away from it. But
maybe.
Yeah, whatever the challenge you have today is the place where you can rise up to, and it might be a different challenge than they're rising up to right now. But you may be able to learn something from them about how to rise up to the challenge that you have. So don't hold yourself to somebody else's standard. Have your own standard, and use comparison to inspire you at what's possible to help you stay the course. But don't use it to beat yourself up again and tell you that you're not good enough.
Yeah, and then what I love about that is we all tend to do this. Again, it's such a universal human thing that well, of course we want to be better, especially if you're in the personal development, growth, and coaching world. You want to be better. And the problem is that we tend to compare with somebody who's way ahead than somebody close to us. And this is why I think community is such a powerful thing, and the right community can propel you really fast. Because if you're part of the right community, you will have people who are a little bit behind you. You will have people who are exactly where you are, very similar to where you are, and you'll have people ahead of you. And this is how human beings operate anyway, is that we contribute and teach those who are a little bit behind us. We help those who are a little bit behind us. We compete and connect and learn and collaborate from those who are at a similar level as at us, and then we are inspired by and directed by those who are ahead of us. And you can put it in simplest form. We have like children in a community, we have younger people, and then we have wiser older people in a community. In simple, doesn't always follow that trajectory, but in a similar way in terms of experience and skill set. And this is why it's so important to be part of a community. So today we had our call, our business call, in the 90-day challenge that we have, and we were working through one of the highest offers this coach wants to offer one of his clients. And as he was thinking through that, I was sharing what happens a few steps ahead, because I was a little bit ahead of him. And as I was sharing it, I could tell he was getting inspired, but his mind was going there. I'm like, okay, that's for the future. But what we need you to do is think about the needs of the client and what you can offer in the moment. And as an example, if I didn't give him that feedback, it was very easy for him to go in that direction, start thinking how big of an offer he can give, and he more than likely would have lost the client in the process. But the reason why I brought him back, because one, I've gone through that so many times. Second, I could tell that what he needs is where he is right now. Because I've gone through that journey, and it's very easy to get carried away with shiny things that are a little bit ahead in your journey. And the reason why I even laid that out, so he understands that there's another cool level coming up ahead, not for him to get focused on that area. But just that subtle thing to bring him back there. If nobody did that, and this is what happens to a lot of coaches, they will go listen to this huge personality in the marketing world or sales world, like, yeah, I can do exactly that he did, and the quarter of the time or half the time or the same amount of time, and then they watch and they look at their timeline compared to their life. Your life might not be anything like theirs. You might not have the same motivations, you might not have the same drive, you might not have the same, you might not even want the same things that that person wants, but all of a sudden you start to copy because you heard a bunch of surface things. And by the way, it doesn't just happen. If you look at, for example, it's one of the things I've noticed in religions, for example. In religions, people tend to deify lots of people, but the problem is that it's not that they're inspired or connected or they have a model. None of those are a problem. The problem is that they always copy the surface of that person, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad or the head of Elon Musk. They will always copy the surface of how that person operates, and they forget that that person is much deeper. And whenever they do that, they fall on their ass. And
I like how you
they
talk
don't
about
realize.
religion. You're like Jesus and Muhammad and Elon Musk.
I wanted to give a separate example.
Yeah, the non-religious example, but I think you're making a really great point. It's like it's if Elon
Not
Musk
that I
or
think he's a religious leader.
yeah, no, I just thought it was funny. But if you take the person that you're following and they do the 5 things you should do every day video, it's like, oh, that's what's gonna get me what they have. Well, that's not a direct connection. It's like, you're not gonna get that client because you're doing those 5 things every day. I mean, it might help you, it might be part of it, but context and like, what's the purpose of that? Maybe that's just a discipline for you to build as part of a skill set towards your goals, including getting that client. But that's not going to automatically translate because you're emulating at a superficial level. There's a journey that you're going to go on as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as whatever it is that you're working towards. If it was easy, it would be easy. You would just do it. It would be so easy, but it's not easy because there's a whole bunch of barriers you have to face and go through. And so the surface level things that you're talking about, Faisal, it's really easy. And there's this whole thing about like highlight reels and easy answers that we all subscribe to sometimes because it's a cultural thing, at least in North America, where it's like everything's got to be easy, fast, and convenient. And if it's not, well, then it's not working. I got to try something else because that's not the answer. So whatever program you bought is like, oh, that's guess after 2 weeks, it's not the answer. Let me buy another program. Or it's like whatever thing I tried, I'm going to give up on it before I've really taken it through the paces and spent the time and the iterations and the energy and the acceptance that this is hard to figure it out, right? Because otherwise it would be so easy and everybody just do it fast, but it's not. The hardest things in life are the ones that take the time for you to figure it out and go through the journey of growth and failure. Like you cannot succeed without failure. You have to fail. It's part of part of the recipe.
If you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, definitely read it. There's no successful
Huge.
business owner, investor I know that has not read that book or has not gone into that. One of the things that he goes into that really hits you is that the way life in business works, the way life works is very similar to how business works. And it is that you need to fail a bunch of times for you to succeed. The way our training in the school system works is you need to succeed in order to succeed. So you're trained to succeed. You're not trained to, and in fact, whenever you fail or you go backwards, you're given a negative feedback. And the other one is then Nassim Taleb, if you ever, he's connected to Naval Ravikant and those guys. He's one of his mentors or one of the people that he's connected to. One of the things he said that really hit me is that almost everybody's looking for recipes. They're looking for a model. Nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, you might look at a model, but you kind of alluded to it before, Daniel, but you will have to customize it to your own growth, because your life is so different from the next person that the elements in your life, even if you took the same exact process, will come out differently. He even put it this way. He's like, if I could be born again and I follow my own model, it still wouldn't work, because then the elements and variables, everything change. Or if you could get the same person to restart the same business, things will change so much. They will have some head start, but it will be different. So instead of looking for recipes, start looking for what your journey is. This is why your vision, your sense of purpose, your journey, your life makes such a big difference. This is why actually coaches need a coach, because it's so easy to get in your head in this process. Along with the community, you need a coach to get you out of your head, because a lot of times we will be stuck in our head and we won't even know that we're stuck in our head. We will just keep repeating the same thoughts and beliefs over and over, and then eventually we end up with either giving up our business, or we create a story around it that, no, this is not for me, or I can't be successful in this process. And usually, if the only way you're gonna actually ultimately fail a business is if you give up.
If you combine comparison with failure, as it's a really interesting, dynamic that I think happens when I start comparing myself to somebody, and then I want to have their level of success. And even if I'm inspired, I might resist doing the things I need to do for fear of failure and not looking good, because that person looks really good. There's a more subtle comparison going on with like, oh, I don't want to appear to other people as less successful or as failing compared to this other person who I don't ever see failing. And one of the things that we only see the highlights, right? We don't see the failures, like all the failures over the years behind the scenes, the 10 years to becoming an overnight success. We don't see any of that stuff. All we see is the stuff that they present, or the pieces that we see are usually the successful parts. Because how often do people talk about how they're failing? Not that often. And some people want the recipe. Well, here's the recipe. It's these 5 steps, but those 5 steps each took 2 years and hundreds of failures along the way to learn how to do those 5 steps in their context with their goals from what they knew, right? And so, yes, there's the 5 big things that you need to do as a coach. Fine, great, but that's not going to give you the recipe necessarily of what you need in your particular space. That's why it's so important to have a clear vision. We're having some serious connection and tech difficulty today. And if you didn't notice, Faisal's in black and white today. If you're watching this in our community on our live broadcast, for some reason, his video is black and white, and we don't know why. That's the last point. I just want to see if I can capture it again, which is comparison and failure don't often come across in the same thought. Like that, oh, if I want to be successful like that, I have to be willing to go through failure after failure to get successful. And maybe it shouldn't even be like that. It should be like the success that I have for myself in my own vision and desires and what I'm creating. And so that's why this morning we were talking about the concept of vision being so important for coaches, especially to understand what it is that you're building. What are you working towards? And how does that work for you in your life? And then there might be some pieces of that where a recipe might be helpful. But broadly speaking, a lot of recipes have to be contextualized into your current context. So I'll just finish with that thought, which is failure is an important part of the puzzle. When you compare, the recipes might not work until you contextualize them, and you're going to have to be willing to fail a lot more than it appears that the other person failed to get success that matters not to them but to you. So today I just want to just remind everybody, if you're comparing yourself to other coaches, as Faisal said, notice the comparison in the moment. This is a coaching skill and also a client skill. When you notice it, then you can pause and slow yourself down and let it go and come back. Don't let those judgments carry forward about like, oh, I'm never going to be that good. Notice it in the moment and become more present to what's actually true. And when you think about what they're accomplishing, don't think about their accomplishments. Think about what you want in your vision. Have a vision, figure out what you're trying to create. And then don't forget that failure is a big part of achieving that vision. If you want to just succeed because you're afraid of failure, you're actually going to slow down your success, because failure is an important part of success. It's the ingredients of success. You cannot succeed unless you fail enough times. Like Edison, right? With the light bulb, I've only succeeded at not building the light bulb 10,000 times before he succeeded at it, right? So I know I'm butchering that quote. But Faisal, if you're with us, I just summarized what we talked about, and thank you for joining us on the podcast. Thank you, listeners, for being with us, and we will see you next time on the Coach's Journey podcast. Or you can listen to one of other podcasts in the description below, or the card might be appearing here. And Faisal, I got your message here in the background. That's okay. You know, tech difficulties show up in black and white. That's fine. Whatever happens, happens, because, you know, we know that you are establishing a new connection as you travel remotely while you work as a coach. And so there's going to be some bumps along the way. These are failures on the path to success, which reminds me of a podcast we also have talked about in the past, which is the one about traveling while coaching. That could be appearing here in a card, or it could be in the description below. So we hope to see you. Go listen to that podcast if you like traveling and you're willing to fail, like Faisal's Connection is failing currently. And we hope to see you next time on the Coach's Journey podcast. We'll see you later.